All right, so today we're diving into some pretty heated waters. We're going to be talking about government spending, specifically President-elect Trump's new Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE. And at the helm of this department are some pretty big names. We have Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy, and they've already set their sights on a very controversial target for their first act.
Yeah, it's definitely a bold move right out of the gate. Their argument in their Wall Street Journal op-ed is that they claim unelected civil servants have way too much power, and this leads to these bloated budgets and decisions that really aren't accountable to voters.
So basically, they're saying the system as it is undemocratic and burdens taxpayers.
Right, yeah, essentially that's their argument.
And to really make their point, they've called out Planned Parenthood specifically.
Right, they're using Planned Parenthood as a prime example. They argue that civil service protections, while they were designed to ensure fairness and all that, have sort of inadvertently created this system that's resistant to change and resistant to accountability. And it really ties into a broader debate about the size and role of government in America. How much should the government be involved in our lives?
Okay, so let's get into the specifics here. They claim Planned Parenthood receives nearly $300 million annually in federal funding. But I've seen other sources that suggest the actual figure might be much higher.
Yeah, you're right. Some sources put that number closer to $700 million. And even Planned Parenthood themselves have reported that number. And on top of that, they reported a record 392,000 abortions performed just last year. So this really raises questions about the role of Planned Parenthood within the larger public health system.
It's definitely a significant part of the healthcare landscape for a lot of people. And Planned Parenthood's CEO, Alexis McGill-Johnson, has already issued a pretty stark warning. She says that if Musk and Ramaswamy get their way, essential services will disappear. And this could cause chaos in the public health system.
Yeah, that's a big concern. We have to remember that Planned Parenthood provides a wide range of services, not just abortion. And a lot of people rely on them for healthcare access, particularly low-income individuals. So the consequences of defunding could be really significant.
It's interesting, though, because Musk and Ramaswamy seem to be basing their whole approach on the U.S. Constitution and two specific Supreme Court rulings. What exactly are they hoping to achieve with this legal basis?
Well, it seems like they believe these rulings could empower the executive branch
Yeah.
to essentially curb the power of federal agencies. We have things like the recent Supreme Court ruling in West Virginia versus EPA, which limited the EPA's authority to regulate greenhouse gas emissions. They could use this as a precedent to argue for DOG's authority to, curtail agency power.
So they're going for a pretty significant shift in how the government operates. And it's not just DOGE making moves here. We're also seeing pro-life advocates entering the scene. They're urging President-elect Trump to fully enforce the Hyde Amendment.
Right, so it's like they're saying, let's skip the whole DOGE thing and just go straight to restricting Planned Parenthood funding through the Hyde Amendment, which just adds another layer of complexity to all of this.
Yeah, for those who might not be familiar with the Hyde Amendment, can you break down what it actually does?
Sure. So basically, the Hyde Amendment prohibits federal funds from being used for abortions, except in very specific cases like rape, incest, or if the mother's life is at risk. So full enforcement would drastically reduce Planned Parenthood's funding and could really impact access to abortion services for a lot of people.
So it's a very contentious issue with far-reaching consequences. And to further complicate things, we even have Brent Letterwood, who is the president of the Ethics and Religious Liberty Commission, formally requesting Trump to reinstate the Hyde Amendment through an executive order.
It really highlights the religious dimension of this whole debate, adding more fuel to an already very heated conversation about Planned Parenthood's future.
And with the Hyde Amendment potentially back in play, pro-life groups are already celebrating what they see as a potential victory.
It's interesting to see how this development could potentially align different groups. Even those with very different viewpoints on other issues, they're all coming together under this shared goal of defunding Planned Parenthood.
It's definitely a powerful unifying force. And speaking of goals, DOGE's ultimate aim is pretty ambitious. They want to end government overspending by July 4, 2026. They're calling it a birthday gift to the nation on its 250th anniversary. What are your thoughts on that timeline?
Well, to achieve that in such a short time frame, they would have to navigate this incredibly complex bureaucracy. And they'd likely face a ton of legal challenges along the way, so it raises serious questions about whether it's even feasible to implement such sweeping changes within that time frame.
It seems like a very tall order indeed. And of course, reactions to all of this have been pretty intense. especially from pro-life advocates.
Absolutely. Like Leila Rose and Charlie Kirk have been very vocal in their support for defunding Planned Parenthood. Kirk even tweeted, "Planned Parenthood, go fund yourself." So the strong language being used on both sides really reflects just how passionate people are about this debate.
And this is where things get really interesting, because some faith leaders are actually seeing God's hand in this whole situation, citing the involvement of non-religious figures like Musk and Ramaswamy as evidence of divine intervention.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. You have figures like Eric Metaxas saying God does most of his best work outside of the church. So they're basically saying divine intervention can manifest in unexpected ways. It's a reminder that people make sense of these political events in very different ways, and they often connect them to their own belief systems.
You've got Elon Musk, who's out there trying to colonize Mars. Now, caught up in this theological debate about divine intervention, it's quite the plot twist.
It really highlights just how deeply personal these issues can become, especially when you add religion into the mix. It's a reminder that we all have our own ways of understanding the world, and sometimes those interpretations can be quite surprising.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
A lot to unpack.
It is, and we've only just scratched the surface. There's a lot more to dive into here. So stay tuned for part 2 of our deep dive into this incredibly complex and rapidly developing situation. We'll be back to explore the potential consequences of these actions and what it all means for the future of government spending in America. Until then, keep those brains buzzing.
And those hearts open.
We'll see you soon.
See you then.
Yeah, it really is fascinating to see these kinds of alliances forming, like you have groups that might disagree on other issues, but they're coming together over this shared goal of defunding Planned Parenthood.
It's definitely a powerful motivator. And then you have these figures like Musk and Ramaswamy, who are known for disrupting, tech and business. Now they're setting their sights on the government.
It's like they're bringing that whole Silicon Valley mindset to Washington.
Exactly. But how realistic is their goal, though? I mean, ending overspending by 2026. It seems incredibly ambitious.
Yeah, their timeline is aggressive for sure. Yeah. They're going to face a lot of pushback. I mean, there are entrenched interests within the government that won't be happy about this. And then there's the potential for legal challenges.
And what about the impact on everyday people? I mean, if DOGE succeeds even partially, what could that mean for the average person?
That's the big question, isn't it? I mean, even if they only achieve a fraction of what they're proposing, it could still significantly change how the government operates and how it allocates resources.
So we could see cuts to programs and services, things like healthcare education infrastructure.
Exactly. And those cuts could disproportionately impact vulnerable populations, the people who rely on those services the most.
We've already heard concerns from Planned Parenthood about healthcare access.
Right. And it's likely that other organizations that serve low-income communities are feeling similar anxieties right now.
So how do you think Planned Parenthood will respond to this?
Well, they're not going down without a fight, that's for sure. They're already mobilizing to protect their funding, emphasizing the role they play in public health, and potentially framing this whole thing as an attack on women's health care.
Do you think that strategy could be effective?
It could be. By highlighting the full range of services they offer, they might be able to gain support from people who maybe don't agree with abortion, but who see value in those other healthcare services.
It's almost like we're facing these fundamental questions about our values as a society. Do we prioritize efficiency above all else? Or do we recognize the need for a safety net?
You've hit the nail on the head. The pursuit of efficiency shouldn't come at the expense of essential services. It's a balancing act, and it requires careful consideration of both the economic and the social consequences.
And then you add in the religious dimension of this whole debate. With these deeply held beliefs about the morality of abortion.
Absolutely, it becomes even more complex. It's not just about policy anymore. For a lot of people, it's about core values and moral convictions.
But wouldn't fully enforcing the Hyde Amendment essentially be imposing a specific religious viewpoint on everyone?
That's a valid concern. The separation of church and state is a fundamental principle in America. And using the Hyde Amendment to restrict access to abortion definitely raises questions about that.
So it's not just about whether DOGE can achieve its goals, it's also about these broader implications for the balance of power and the role of personal beliefs in shaping public policy.
Exactly. The decisions made now will have lasting impacts on how the government functions and how resources are allocated.
It's a lot to consider. What should people be paying attention to as this unfolds?
Well, there are a few key developments to keep an eye on. I think the big question is, can DOGE actually deliver on its promises? Can they really overcome all the obstacles, the political roadblocks, the bureaucracy, you know, and implement these sweeping changes they're talking about? And if they do, what are the unintended consequences?
It's like watching this high-stakes game unfold. You have DOGE making these bold moves, and everyone else is just trying to figure out what they'll do next.
And speaking of players, what about Planned Parenthood? Will they end up being the poster child for DOGE's cost-cutting crusade? Or will they somehow manage to hold on to their funding?
I think it's going to be a long and messy fight. Both sides are going to use every tool at their disposal. We can expect lawsuits, public campaigns, intense lobbying, and public opinion is going to play a huge role in all of this.
Oh yeah, the media coverage is going to be relentless. And what about the religious aspect of this debate? Do you think faith leaders will continue to have a strong voice?
I think so. For a lot of people, this goes beyond just politics. It's about deeply held moral beliefs. So I think faith leaders will continue to speak out. They'll mobilize their congregations, and they'll be actively involved in the political process.
It's amazing how this one issue has brought together so many different perspectives. It feels like a turning point, not just for Planned Parenthood, but for the future of government spending and the balance of power in America. I think you're right. These decisions that are being made right now, they're going to have long-lasting effects on how our government operates and how it uses its resources.
So much to think about. As we wrap up this deep dive, is there one key takeaway you'd like our listeners to consider?
I would just encourage everyone to really think critically about all of this. Don't just take things at face value. Dig deeper, consider different viewpoints, and form your own informed opinions. This is too important to just sit on the sidelines. Engage in the conversation, make your voice heard, and help shape the future of our country.
Well said. It's been an incredibly insightful journey exploring all of this with you. Thanks for helping us navigate this complex landscape.
My pleasure. The quest for knowledge never ends, right? So keep asking questions, keep challenging assumptions, and keep searching for the truth. That's what it's all about.
That's it for this deep dive, folks. Thanks for joining us. Be sure to check back for more deep dives into the most pressing issues of our time. Until then, stay curious, stay engaged, and most importantly, stay informed of new